Counsel?
Thank you. Mr. Geragos.
Oh, your microphone.
Mr. Geragos, did you keep copies of notes of conversations with Mr. Jackson?
No.
Did you make any notes of your conversations with Mr. Jackson?
Probably not.
You didn't make any notes at all of any of your.
Probably not. I generally don't do that with my clients. I generally just talk to them.
Did you make notes of any of your conversations with any of the other individuals who were working for Mr. Jackson at the time?
I don't think so.
You made no notes of any conversation with Dieter Weisner?
Dieter Weisner, as I explained before, I didn't really talk to in February or March, other than on that one occasion. Ronald I would talk to, but I'm not a big note taker.
No notes of conversations with Ronald Konitzer?
I wouldn't say no, but none that I can remember taking.
Do you think that your file might have notes of conversations with Ronald Konitzer?
To be honest, I'd have to look.
Do you think that your file would have notes of conversations with Mark Schaffel?
No.
How about Frank Cassio?
No.
How about Vinny Amen?
I don't know that I ever had, unless he was standing with Frank when I talked with Frank. I don't know that I ever had a conversation directly with him. Maybe when he was with Frank, but no, I wouldn't have notes.
Did you have any email communications with Michael Jackson?
No, I don't believe so.
Did you have any email communications with any of the other named people, the people I just named?
Probably Ronald would be on. Emails that would come from David Legrand would have Ronald's name on them as well.
So you would have kept communications between yourself and David Legrand through email?
No, I wouldn't have kept them, but I would have had them at one point. I don't know that I would have kept them. Like I say, I would have had them if they had sent them to me, but probably would have deleted after I got whatever information I wanted.
Is it your habit and custom to print out copies of your emails and keep them?
No.
Is it your habit and custom to keep your emails electronically stored in your computer?
No. If it's something particularly important, I'll just click over and save it into WordPerfect and then save it in the file, but I generally do not keep the emails segregated with whatever else.
Do you have a WordPerfect file on Michael Jackson?
I believe that I do.
Does it contain email communications?
I don't think I had any emails with him. I'd have to double check to be sure, but I don't think I did.
Did you have email communications with Brad Miller?
I think that I did.
Did you save those email communications?
I don't think that I did.
You might have.
Maybe.
Would it be your habit and custom to title those email communications with your investigator and put them in your file as a WordPerfect document?
If I looked in WordPerfect, that's, if it was something important and I saved it into WordPerfect, that would be the way to tell.
Is it the case that you're the only lawyer remaining in Los Angeles County who still uses WordPerfect? Laughter.
Probably so, but it's the 11 series, so.
Mr. Geragos, I'd like to show you an exhibit. Could I approach the witness?
Yes.
Number 347, would you take a look at that, please?
Okay.
That's an exhibit containing 2 notes, is that correct?
Yes. It's got 2 blue pieces of paper with handwriting on it.
Do you recognize that as your former client's handwriting?
Excuse me, could I see what this is?
Yes.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
It's admitted in evidence, Your Honor.
He just needs to see what it is.
I understand. Thank you. Do you recognize that as Mr. Jackson's handwriting?
No.
Were you familiar with Mr. Jackson's handwriting?
Familiar with his signature and familiar with some of the way he signs off. But not, this does not appear, there's nothing about it that I recognize.
All right. Would you read those 2 notes, please, out loud?
But you have to really be honest in your heart that I am your dad and will take good care of you, Dad. I want you to have a great time in Florida. I'm very happy to be your daddy. Blanket, Prince and Paris are your brothers and sisters. Love, Dad.
All right. Would you be surprised to learn that that is, in fact, a note or 2 notes written by Mr. Jackson to Gavin Arvizos?
I don't know. Would I be surprised? I don't know. I probably would be surprised.
All right. Mr. Geragos, if, in fact, those are notes written by the defendant to Gavin Arvizos, that would be inconsistent with what you tell us he told you about not wanting to be called Dad, is that right?
Objection. Misstates the evidence. He said someone else told him.
Yeah.
Just a moment. And no speaking objections, Mr. Mesereau.
Yes, sir.
All right, you may answer. I'm not sure you answered or you were responding to Mr. Mesereau, so.
Should the question be reread, Your Honor?
Reread the question.
I believe that I don't know what dates these were written on, and I don't know that it's his handwriting. Are you asking me to assume it's his handwriting? If I assume it's his handwriting, yes, that would be surprising to me.
Now, to your knowledge, the only trip that the Arvizos ever took to Florida with Mr. Jackson was the one that they took just prior to arriving in Neverland on the 7th. Is that correct?
From the discovery, that's my understanding.
You have no other information that the Arvizo family ever took any other trip to Florida with Mr. Jackson?
Right. I don't have any other information that they took any other trip.
Do you have any information that the Arvizo family took a trip anywhere with Mr. Jackson other than Florida and Neverland?
No.
Now, I asked you a number of questions about your giving counsel to your client about the Arvizo family leaving Neverland. When did you finally tell your client that it's time for the Arvizo family to go home?
I think I don't know that it was Michael or Ronald, or maybe on the same phone call, but sometime in March of '03.
Now, were you aware in March of '03 that the Arvizo family was still at Neverland?
I think they had come and gone, was my understanding back then, in March of '03.
At the time of the conversation with Mr. Jackson, let me strike that and re-ask that. Did you finally have a conversation with Michael Jackson about the fact that the Arvizos should not be at Neverland?
I had a conversation. My only hesitancy is when you say was it with Michael Jackson. I don't think it was with Michael. I think the conversation was with either Ronald or Brad saying that, this is not a good situation. I don't think that the conversation was with Michael.
Well, Brad Miller was working for Michael Jackson at the time?
Brad Miller was working for me.
All right.
Brad Miller would be a liaison. If I were in trial, I would have Brad communicate messages, but Brad was not talking to Michael. Brad would have been talking to one of the people that I mentioned.
All right. Is there a reason you didn't call Michael Jackson directly, given that he was your client?
Well.
And tell him to send the Arvizo family home? Is there a reason you didn't do that?
Because I don't believe, at the time when I had that conversation, that Michael was even at Neverland. I don't think Michael was there then.
Did you make any effort to determine when Michael Jackson would be at Neverland?
Well, when you say, make an effort to determine, I believe at one point he was out of state in March, and I was informed of that, and so that was the basis for my opinion.
Did you?
Objection. He's cutting off the witness.
Sustained.
May the witness complete his answer, Your Honor?
Had you completed your answer?
No, but I forgot what I was going to say.
Did you make an effort to contact Michael Jackson out of state?
No, well, I think that I was told he was out of state. I think it was one of those brief conversations when he was on with somebody else. I was having a conversation with somebody else, he was either in the room or got on for a minute. But, no, that was not. I didn't consider that I was dictating to him what he needed to do. I was there, I thought, to do an investigation. I was there to make sure that nothing unfair happened to him and his kids. That was my role.
At some point in time around the middle of the month of February, did you learn that the family had left Neverland?
This was what was objected to before. Do you want me to answer it now?
I'd like to know if you learned at some time in the middle of February that the family had left Neverland. Yes or no?
Yes, I was told by somebody that the family had left Neverland.
All right. Okay. Now, were you aware that there were telephone calls being made from Frank Cassio to Janet Arvizo asking her to return to Neverland?
I found that out later. I did not know it at the time.
Are you aware that your investigator, Brad Miller, tape recorded one or more of those conversations?
I'm aware of one. I found that out when the police searched Brad's office and got that tape, and later learned what that was.
Did you direct Mr. Miller to tape record those telephone calls?
I said I was aware of one.
Did you direct Brad Miller?
And I did not direct him to tape a phone call surreptitiously. The only tape that I directed him to do that was an audio tape, was the one where I said, I want you to sit down and interview them. And I also told him, I want a log of where they are. I did not tell him to tape Frank Tyson or that one phone call.
Did Mr. Miller tell you about the conversation that he tape recorded between Frank Cassio or Frank Tyson and Janet Arvizo?
Objection. Assumes facts not in evidence. No foundation. Misstates the evidence as well.
Overruled. You may answer.
Brad later told me, when you and I and Mr. Snedden were litigating this issue, and I asked him about it, that the reason he did it is because Frank had led him to believe.
I'm going to object at this time too.
Objection. He's cutting off the witness.
Well,
Overruled. The question is simply whether or not he told you about tape recording the conversation.
Do you want me to answer, yes, or, no? Yes.
Now, when was the conversation that you had with Brad Miller where he acknowledged tape recording that conversation? When was that?
It would have been substantially after the tape was seized from his office.
Alright. Back during the month of February, was Brad Miller informing you as to the content of his investigation?
He was pretty dill.
Objection. Leading. Your Honor. Vague as to time.
I said February.
Can I assume 2003?
Just a moment. Just a moment. All right. I'll overrule the objection. Do you want the question read back? I'll order it read back.
I remember. I was going to answer. He was being fairly diligent about telling me. He did not tell me about that one particular call until after it was seized when I started to question him about it.
Did he tell you about any conversations that took place between Frank Cassio and Janet Arvizo?
That conversation.
Did he tell you that in the middle part of February, Frank Cassio was trying to get Janet Arvizo back to Neverland Ranch?
No, that's not what he told me. Do you want me to tell you what he told me?
Did he tell you that anybody from Neverland Ranch was making efforts to get Janet Arvizo back?
No, he told me that he was.
I'm going to object as non-responsive.
No.
Sustained.
Mr. Geragos, did you have conversations with any employee of Michael Jackson on whether or not the Arvizo family should be videotaped and whether or not that videotape should be included in a commercial production to be aired on television?
I was told that they were going to be videotaped, and it would have been by David or Ronald. And I instructed Brad to go to the videotaping and to remain there until he got a copy of the videotape.
Were you consulted at any time by any employee of Michael Jackson as to whether or not waivers would be necessary for such a thing?
No.
Were you consulted by anybody employed by Michael Jackson on the question of whether or not any member of the Arvizo family should be compensated for their involvement in this tape?
I was told that they wanted to be compensated for the tape.
Alright, and did you tell? Who was that who told you that?
As I sit here, I would just be guessing. I know that I was told that they wanted to be compensated for the tape.
And did you tell that person that that would be an appropriate thing to do, since it was a commercial interest?
No, I don't think I had anything to do with it. In fact, I think that was dealt with. All of the licensing and everything having to do with the rebuttal was handled by, I think, David and Schaffel.
At the time of the conversation with this person about them wanting to be compensated for this tape, did you ask that person if the Arvizo family was still staying at Neverland Ranch?
I don't remember if I did.
Do you know if you told that person that it was not a good idea for these people to be associating with Michael Jackson?
Well, I know that I had that conversation.
With whom?
I'm sure I've had it with Brad. I'm sure I've had it with Ronald. And I'm positive that at one point I had that conversation with David.
With who?
David Legrand.
With David Legrand. Did any of them tell you that was difficult to do because Mr. Jackson enjoyed sleeping with Gavin Arvizo?
Objection. Assumes facts not in evidence. Argumentative.
Overruled. You may answer.
No, nobody told me that.
When did you first learn that there was, in fact, a succession of young boys that had been sleeping with Michael Jackson over the last 15 years?
Objection. Misstates the evidence. Argumentative. No foundation. Move to strike.
Argumentative. Sustained.
Did you ever learn about Brett Barnes?
Doesn't ring a bell.
Did you ever learn about Jordy Chandler?
The same person you asked me about earlier.
Yes.
From 93, yes.
Asked and answered.
All right.
Just a moment.
And in the process of investigating.
Just a moment. I'm ruling on an objection here.
I'm sorry. I thought you had.
Sustained.
Did you ever determine whether or not Geordie Chandler had spent many consecutive nights in bed with Michael Jackson?
Objection. Beyond the scope. No foundation. Argumentative.
Sustained.
Did you make any investigation into any of the allegations against Michael Jackson that occurred back in 1993 and prior to 93?
Objection. Beyond the scope. No foundation. Argumentative.
Overruled. You may answer.
Over the break, I was given the written waiver, and the written waiver was up through.
Microphone, sir.
The written waiver was up through the time of arrest. To answer that, I would have to go beyond that.
I didn't understand that the waiver was limited.
Nor did I.
Yes, Your Honor. If I didn't say that, I meant to. We were going to limit it until up to the time of Mr. Jackson's arrest.
That's not what you informed all of us. Take the jury out, please. Counsel. You didn't inform Mr. Geragos, myself, or anyone else in the courtroom that there was anything other than a waiver of the attorney-client privilege. You didn't indicate there was any limitations on that waiver.
That's my mistake, Your Honor. I was thinking in terms of the period, relevant time period, not after the arrest, the time he was involved with Mr. Konitzer, Dieter, people like that. That's my mistake, and I apologize. I didn't think anything was relevant after the arrest.
They can't hear you talking back there.
I didn't think anything was relevant after the arrest. And I should have been clear about that. That's my mistake.
Well, I consider you've made a total, complete waiver on the record. You know, I'm not going to allow you to give with one hand and take away with the other.
Can I inquire, Your Honor? With all due respect, what would be relevant after the arrest to the time period that's being litigated in court? I don't think there is anything. I believe the allegations.
The relevancy is one issue, granted. But that's not what we're talking about now. We're talking about the scope of the waiver that you represented that existed. Mr. Geragos is on the witness stand. He's answering questions, and then you inform him during a break that there's some limitation. I think relevance has to be dealt with on a question-by-question basis. I'm not dealing with that. I'm dealing with the extent of the waiver that you indicated to the court and to Mr. Geragos that you have.
I guess I did do that. And unfortunately, I meant to cover the period involving this case, which I thought was before the arrest, and that was my mistake. I didn't think it included, Your Honor, the period of time following the initial information. I didn't think that was relevant. I wasn't even considering that. I was thinking about the time period during which the prosecution has elicited testimony, and he elicited testimony regarding these alleged events.
Well, what's your position?
I think it may be appropriate to ask this witness questions about his conversations with the defendant and questions about his involvement in the case even after the arrest. It could have bearing certainly on his conduct here, or conduct that he took after the time of the arrest could have bearing on whether or not he did or didn't do certain things prior to the arrest. I just don't think that we should be restrained from having to limit our questions only up to the time of his arrest.
Your Honor, may I just interject one thing, since I'm going to be the one asked the questions? If there's not a waiver from the client.
I'm going to object.
If there's not a waiver.
No, he has my permission to speak.
If there's not a waiver by the client, I believe under state bar rules, I am completely exposed. And I would inform the court, without a written waiver, I am not going to answer, even under threat of contempt, any further questions that have to do with anything which is stated at least in the written waiver that I have, under or after December of 2003, because I can't put that genie back into the bottle at this point. Frankly, I think technically the arrest was in November of 2003, in the first place, but the letter states December of 2003. And I believe under state bar rules, I'm not allowed to answer anything unless there's a written waiver that is fully informed by the client.
Your Honor, we haven't been furnished with a copy of that waiver. We would like to see it, please.
Go ahead and...
We have another copy, Your Honor.
Do you want to make a copy or?
That's okay.
The question that was asked was whether or not he'd made an investigation into the 1993 allegations. And that was when he advised us that he had been given a limited waiver. So I guess if the question was whether you'd made any investigation into the allegations about 1993 back in February, that you would be able to answer that question.
That's correct, Your Honor. In fact, if the question was limited to anything prior to, I believe it was November, I want to say 18th or 19th of 2003, anything prior to that date I'm comfortable with and don't have a problem. Anything after that date, I'm going to refuse or decline to answer. Respectfully, of course.
I'm not quite sure how to deal with it, but one way we can deal with it is that the relevancy of his testimony is based on what happened in February, March, and maybe up to the time of arrest. And then we could complete that testimony, and if you then thought you had some need to go into other areas, we could get some points and authorities on where we stand on the misrepresentation that Mr. Mesereau has made to the court and to counsel. That way, though, if we take evidence limited in that respect today, we can free counsel up to get back to his trial. I know he's got a trial in Los Angeles that he needs to be at. And if we do it that way, then what I would do is hold you on call to me.
I kind of thought I already was.
Huh?
I kind of thought I already was.
Yeah, you are. But, you know, in the future, and...
Judge, is the court under the expectation that we're actually going to finish by 2:30 today?
Uh-huh, aren't you?
Not optimistically, no, not with redirect as well. I may finish cross. I don't know that we're going to finish redirect.
Well, let's see what we do. Sometimes, anyway. I then will proceed in this fashion, reserving what remedies exist. What should be done under the circumstances. But we don't waste the last hour, and perhaps we're able to free counsel and perhaps not. Is that an agreeable way to proceed?
It is. And while the jury is out, let me also ask that we be furnished at this time Mr. Geragos's file, at least the file that existed up to the date of the arrest, which would include all of his billing records, his notes, his emails, his handwritings, communications and reports. There is a waiver up till that time.
I'm not going to order that, counsel. You can use the proper process for that. Now, is that an agreeable way to proceed, Mr. Mesereau, today?
Yes, Your Honor. And I apologize for it was not intentional, what you've categorized as a misrepresentation. I apologize for that. It was not intentional. I was thinking of the period of the alleged conspiracy.
People can't hear you.
I was thinking of the period of the alleged conspiracy. I was not thinking beyond that, and that's my mistake. And I do apologize to the court.
All right, we'll see where that gets us. I don't know where that gets us. Let's bring the jury in and see what we can achieve. Go ahead, counsel.
All right. Mr. Geragos, the tape recording of the telephone call that I had asked you about previously, the call between Frank Cassio and Janet Arvizos. You did tell us that you listened to that tape recording, is that correct?
Yes, well, we're right back to where we were before.
Excuse me, let me just take care of something. I'll just have the court reporter mark that. Next question.
Mr. Geragos, at some time after that interview that your investigator, Mr. Miller, had with the Arvizos family at your direction, you became aware of the fact that there was going to be a filming of the entire family, is that right?
I don't know if it was the whole family, but I was aware there was going to be a videotaping, yes.
And were you aware at that time that that video was going to be used in a commercial production?
I knew that the videotaping was going to be. They were trying to sell it. That's what they were going to do. So if you mean commercial, that way, yes, they were trying to sell it. I don't know if they had already cut a deal or not.
Was it your understanding that the Arvizos' participation in that video would have commercial value to your client, Mr. Jackson?
I don't know if I'm qualified to answer that.
Was that your belief at the time?
I don't know that I ever thought about it at the time.
Did anybody ever talk to you about the commercial value of their involvement in this video?
Nobody was looking for my advice on commercial value of the rebuttal video.
Did anybody ever consult with you at all about the propriety of using the Arvizos family in this video?
I don't know about, well, I just said if some statements were going to be taped, I wanted a copy.
Did you know that Gavin Arvizos was a cancer survivor?
I did not then, when that tape was made.
Well, that tape was made, what, the 20th?
I think that tape was made the 20th. And I probably knew that either on that following day or the day after. But I think very close in time.
Mr. Geragos, you had not watched the documentary, Living with Michael Jackson, prior to that?
But I had not investigated records or anything like that. I later got records and confirmed what was being said.
Isn't it true that the documentary, Living with Michael Jackson, has clearly stated that Gavin Arvizos is a cancer survivor?
Yes.
And you did view that documentary prior to the taping on the 20th?
Right, but I wasn't buying anything until I had documentation.
Alright, but you had information, at least, that Gavin Arvizos was a cancer survivor, is that right?
That's what the claim was.
Did you ever ask Michael Jackson if it was true that Gavin Arvizos was a cancer survivor?
Not in February of 2003.
Of any of the conversations that you had with David LeGrand or Ronald Konitzer, did you ask either one of them if it was true that Gavin Arvizos was a cancer survivor?
I think that the discussions were had sometime in February about that subject.
You were aware, were you not, that the filming and presentation and airing of the documentary, Living with Michael Jackson, caused Gavin Arvizos considerable problems in his life?
Objection. Foundation.
Overruled. You may answer.
I was aware that the claim was made that he was being taunted at school.
And you knew that prior to the 20th of February, is that right?
I don't think I knew it prior to the 20th. I think I knew it closer to the end of the month or the beginning of March.
When you viewed the documentary, Living with Michael Jackson, did you understand at the time that that documentary was going to cause Gavin Arvizos problems?
Objection. Foundation.
My
Overruled. You may answer.
Gavin Arvizos wasn't my client. Michael Jackson was my client.
I understand that.
I was not, I don't want to sound heartless, but I was worried about my client's problems.
I understand you were worried about your client's problems, but did you, in fact, understand that the airing of that documentary could cause Gavin Arvizos problems because of how he was depicted and portrayed?
I suppose in retrospect, yes. At the time, I thought that it would have the opposite effect for him. He would be able to exploit that for money. That was my worry, that he was going to, or the family was going to go sell their story for a six-figure sum. I had that concern.
Now, actually, sell the story to whom?
One of the tabloids.
Well, they would have a right to do that, wouldn't they?
Yes.
There's absolutely nothing illegal about selling your own story?
If it's false, then you have actions that you can take, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to have the tape, because I wanted to have them locked into what the truth was and not later sell a false story, because my experience is that the tabloids are not always absolutely accurate.
Alright, now, that's not necessarily the problem of the Arvizos, whether or not the tabloids are accurate, right?
I don't know that I would agree with that.
Alright, but the Arvizos certainly would have a right, in this country, to sell their story to anybody?
They would, and as I stated, I already had a concern about the Arvizos because of the J.C. Penney lawsuit, so I was not exactly looking at them as being pristine or pure at that point. I had, for lack of a better word, I had a rather jaded view at that point.
In fact, Michael Jackson was marketing the Arvizos story for profit, is that true?
Objection. Foundation. Assumes facts not in evidence.
Overruled. You may answer.
They were trying to do, my understanding, what they called a rebuttal video. And the reason they were trying to do a rebuttal video, I suppose, was, as you indicated, for profit. It wasn't being done pro bono.
And your client believed that if the Arvizos were included and their story was included in this production, it would be more profitable to him, is that true?
Actually, I don't know.
Objection. Assumes facts not in evidence. Foundation.
Overruled.
Actually, I don't know what my client believed. All I know is when I heard that they were going to be included, I wanted to have a copy of the statements, the videotaped statements. I did not specifically talk to Michael about, are you doing this for money? Is this something that you have a belief we're going to use them for marketing, or anything of that nature?
Did you have a conversation with anybody at Hamid Moslei's home? Easy for me to say.
Common spelling.
Continuing, Hamid Moslei's home on the 19th of February of 2003?
I could have, if Brad was there. It would have made sense that Brad might have called me and said, they're not giving me the videotape, because they didn't give me the videotape.
Did you at any time during the evening of the 19th, into the early morning hours of the 20th, give any direction to any employee of Michael Jackson about what they should ask or what they shouldn't ask?
Absolutely.
The Arvizo family?
Absolutely not.
Did anybody consult with you about the script that would be used for the Arvizo family?
I didn't know that there was a script.
Did anybody ask you whether or not the Arvizos should be specifically asked questions about whether Gavin was molested?
I specifically said, I want copies of the videotape. I do not believe that I talked to Hamid. And I can't pronounce his last name.
Moslehi.
Easy for you to say. And I don't believe that I talked to anybody else that evening but Brad. I could be mistaken, but my memory is that I would have talked to Brad. That Brad told me that they weren't giving up a videotape, or that it was getting late, or I told him, I don't want to talk to you anymore. Don't call me anymore. It's late. I've got to go to bed.
Did you talk to Mark Schaffel that night?
I don't think so. I think I might have talked to Schaffel the next day to find out why we didn't get a copy of the videotape.
Did you talk to Christian Robinson?
I don't think I've ever talked to Christian Robinson. At least back in February or March of 2003, I don't believe I've talked to Christian Robinson.
Did you talk to Vicky Podboreski that night?
I did not.
Did you refer anybody to Vicky Podboreski?
I think Brad called and said that.
Mr. Geragos, did you refer anybody to Vicky Podboreski?
I was trying to answer the question. Brad called and asked for a referral. I did not refer to Vicky Podboreski. I referred to Michael Nassatir. Vicky Podboreski is Michael's partner.
Alright, and you referred Brad Miller to Michael Nassatir, is that right?
Brad said that Janet wanted a lawyer. I said, I can't represent Janet. My firm's not going to represent Janet. Call Mike Nassatir and see if it's something he can handle.
Alright, you were the one who then gave Brad Miller the name of Mike Nassatir's law firm, is that correct?
That's correct.
You didn't say, Vicky Podboreski.
I did not say, Vicky Podboreski. I said, Mike Nassatir.
Did you have a conversation with Vicky Podboreski that night?
I don't believe it was that night. But if she says it was, I would defer to her. My memory is that I talked to Mike Nassatir.
Did you talk to Mike Nassatir that night?
Might have said, I'm referring over a case, or, Brad's going to call you. Talk to him, do whatever you have to do.
Did you tell Mike Nassatir that you would be financially responsible for his bill?
Absolutely not.
Did you tell him that Michael Jackson would be financially responsible?
Absolutely not.
Did you know who was going to be responsible for his bill?
It wasn't my firm. It wasn't my business.
Did it come up in the conversation with Brad Miller?
No. Why would it? No.
Now, at this point, you understood that Janet Arvizo did not have a lot of money?
I don't know that I understood that. I was aware of a J.C. Penney lawsuit. I was aware that she had a boyfriend who seemed to be making very good money. So, no, I'm not aware that she was completely limited in terms of her funding.
Did you ever make any effort to determine whether or not she was going to have to pay a retainer to the law firm of Mr. Nassatir?
Absolutely not. It wasn't my business.
You did have a conversation with Mr. Nassatir either that night or the next morning.
I believe it was the next morning, but I could be mistaken. It might have been that night. And I believe the conversation was that I referred somebody over, and this is the name and the number. And, handle it however you want to handle it.
Did you ask Mr. Nassatir to contact you after his interview with Janet Arvizo and tell you the content of that interview?
If I talked to him that night, I probably would have said, let me know what happens, yes.
Would you have asked him to tell you about the content of the conversation?
I would have wanted to know what was being said, yes.
Would you have asked him to get an express waiver of attorney-client privilege from Janet Arvizo so that he could talk to you about the exact content of that conversation?
No, I wouldn't have advised him how to practice law. He's I think a certified specialist in criminal law, and I would assume he would know that.
Did you tell Brad Miller that you wanted Brad Miller to become informed of the conversation that Janet Arvizo was having with this attorney?
No, it was the opposite. Janet kept telling Brad she wanted him there.
Did you have?
And Brad said he couldn't go, and that's why he volunteered a SOF instead.
Did you have a conversation with Brad Miller wherein you specifically asked Brad Miller to get as much information as he could of the conversation between Janet Arvizo and the Nassatir lawyer?
No. In fact, my understanding was, I told them, I can't get in the middle of that. Refer it out. And she kept asking Brad to attend with her at that interview.
Did Brad Miller tell you specifically that the interview they were referring to was a Department of Child Family Services interview?
I think he did, yes.
Did you understand that that interview was taking place because of concerns about whether or not her children were being exposed to Michael Jackson?
Objection. Misstates the evidence.
Overruled. You may answer.
I learned that after the fact, after the interview.
Who is it who told you that Janet Arvizos was going to have an interview with the Department of Child and Family Services representatives?
I believe it was Brad.
And he told you that that night?
I believe so. I believe that it was that night that he said she was asking him to go with her to the interview.
Do you know why this interview was conducted at 2 o'clock in the morning, hours before the start of the interview with Janet Arvizos and the Department of Child Family Services?
I have no idea.
Objection. Misstates the evidence.
Overruled. You may answer.
I have no idea why it was 2 o'clock in the morning. I do have a memory of saying, "Stop calling me, because I'm going to bed."
Did you tell Brad Miller at any time that they should have that interview done before the start of her interview with the Department of Child Family Services?
Absolutely not. One, in my mind, had nothing to do with the other.
Did you tell Brad Miller to tape record that interview with the Department of Family Services?
Absolutely not. No, I absolutely did not.
Did you tell Brad Miller that he should have somebody else tape record that interview?
Absolutely not. I didn't know that he was going to have anybody there.
Did you have Asaf there that day?
I did not have Asaf there that day.
Did you know Asaf prior to that day?
I think I met Asaf on one prior investigation that I had hired Brad on.
Is that Asaf Vilchik?
I think that's his last name.
And did you understand him to be an employee, a part-time employee of Brad Miller?
Yes.
Is Brad Miller someone you had worked with for a period longer than 5 years prior to that day?
No.
Did you feel that you knew Brad Miller fairly well?
I thought I knew him, yes. At that time, I don't know if I would say, fairly well, but I used him, as I indicated, probably on 3 or 4 different cases. I use a number of investigators.
Was there any conversation between you and Brad Miller that night, on the evening of the 19th, about whether or not the DCSF interview would be tape recorded?
No, absolutely not.
When did you first learn that that interview had been tape recorded?
I can't answer that, Your Honor.
Mark that. Next question, please.
When did you listen to the tape recording for the first time?
I can't answer that.
Did you have a conversation with Brad Miller within the next week about the meeting with the Department of Child Family Services?
I probably would have, yes. I don't have, as I sit here, I don't remember it, but it would not have been unlikely.
Did Brad Miller brief you about the content of the Department of Child and Family Services meeting?
I think I was told that there wasn't any problem. And I don't know if I was told that within a week or within a day, but I think I was just told that there was no problem.
Did you ask him, Brad Miller, if he was, in fact, present during the course of the meeting with the representatives from the Department of Child and Family Services?
I don't remember doing it, but it certainly would not have been unusual for me to have done it. As I sit here, I don't remember asking him that, but it's logical that I would have.
Did Brad Miller tell you that he was personally present during that interview?
I don't remember the conversation, but I don't at any time remember Brad telling me that he was present during that interview.
Did he ever tell you who was present during that interview?
That's another question I can't answer.
All right, mark it.
Did Brad Miller ever tell you that Asaf was present during the beginning of the interview?
That's another question I can't answer.
Next question. Mark it.
Did Asaf ever tell you how that tape got in the hands of MSNBC and Dan Abrams?
That's another question I can't answer.
All right, I think we'll take our recess early today. I don't think this is productive to proceed this way. To the jury, any objection if you go home 7 minutes early?
Oh, no.
See you Monday morning at 8:30. Remember the admonition. Counsel remain a moment.
Thank you. Mr. Geragos, do you still have that exhibit in front of you or did I take it back already?
Yes.
Mr. Geragos, you may step down, but remain within the bar. You have an interest, a stake here. I think you have counsel here.
Pat's sitting here, but I'll be one of those pro-pers. My biggest concern is I'm engaged in Department C-35 in a jury trial that has been ongoing now for 8 weeks in Santa Ana Court before the Honorable Judge.
Could you come to the microphone? There's people that just can't hear you back there.
I'll move out of your way.
I'm presently engaged in jury trial in Department C-35, Long Cause Court, in Santa Ana. I've been there for 8 weeks. We have 18 jurors in the box. I'm in the middle of cross-examination. This is a case that's estimated to last till August. The case is actually 7 years old. It's been to the Supreme Court and back, and there is a published decision on it. All the jurors are ordered back for Monday morning at 9 o'clock. I am ordered back by Judge Fazil at 8:45. Obviously I do not want to incur the wrath of this court, but I believe that if I'm ordered back for Monday, I'm going to be under competing court orders, and somebody's going to find me in contempt.
Who do you want to do that? Laughter.
I think I hate to say this, as much as I love Santa Maria, I'd rather spend my time in the OSC jail, so.
We have a nice jail here.
We can call that judge. I understand. In fact, that's why I ordered you up today, was when I heard that you were in a lengthy jury trial. My choice was not to disturb the jury trial on Monday, because I know how hard it is for any jury to have to deal with these kind of problems. And I fully anticipated that we'd be able to get all of your testimony in today. You know, the district attorney had said that he only had a few more minutes with Legrand, and that didn't happen, so you were kept upstairs for a period I didn't anticipate this morning. But his courtroom is dark on Fridays?
I believe has a law and motion calendar on Fridays, and that's why it's dark for jury trials. The jury was ordered back for 9 o'clock. The next day off is the 20th. I've already inquired here. I guess you're not working. I guess this court is dark on the 20th. And then we do have, even though I'm supposed to be out of the country, we're dark on the 26th of May. I suppose I could always delay that trip to later in the day if I could get.
Well, I'm not going to put it off that long. What I could do is cancel our day off on the 20th. The 20th was going to be a day off because Mr. Sanger had made a commitment to appear.
If it's just Mr. Sanger, I've got no problem screwing up his day off.
So I'm trying to. What I'm going to require here is some points and authorities from both sides. I'm not quite sure of where we are and what we should be doing. And so it wouldn't hurt if. Clearly everyone's going to have their points and authorities to me Monday, but then we could take your testimony next Friday and.
That's fine, and I'd appreciate it. The case I had on Friday, I was hoping that you would say that. I had somebody go out to San Bernardino this morning and continue a prelim that was set for the 20th, so I can move the other 2 things that I have, so it's not a problem.
Your Honor, on Friday, from a selfish standpoint, could we limit the day to Mr. Geragos's testimony?
Yes.
So when we're through, then we could go, because I could still make part of it.
Right. We can set Friday just for Mr. Geragos's testimony.
Thank you.
How much more testimony? How much longer do you think I know. The problem is if I give you a week, then it will, to think of questions, then.
Exactly.
You're asking me how many more minutes of cross-examination I have?
Estimate your time.
Oh, gosh. A half hour at least.
Is that all?
Well, no. Laughter.
Well, we have a serious problem to deal with, and I really don't have I really am not. All we can do is do some research.
I'll try to accommodate the court as best I can.
If I bring the jury in, I'm not going to bring them in just for a half hour of testimony on Friday, so we'll use the whole day. That would not be fair to the jury.
Whatever the court decides.
I think that's what we've got to do.
If we quit early, let me put it this way. If we quit early on Friday, it would be nice, but whatever the court can do with that in mind.
All right.
May I be excused, with the promise that I will return at 8:30 on Friday the 20th?
You're ordered to return on Friday.
And I promise I'll be here.
By 8:30.
Thank you.
I want points and authorities from Mr. Mesereau, and I want points and authorities from Mr. Snedden. Are you interested in?
Yes, I had hoped that you would invite me to, but I was going to. I'll try to keep it short, but I'll point to what I think are the applicable code sections that are appropriate in the rules of professional conduct.
The issue I want addressed is not what the ethical rules are. We know that. What I want to address is what happens in the middle of testimony when the party who's asserted that they have given you a waiver on the record, a waiver of the attorney-client privilege, suddenly reveals in the writing that you don't have a complete waiver. And what are the remedies? What should I do?
My belief is that under the
Well,
I won't give it to you now.
don't shoot from the hip. I can't believe that this ever happened to you before, did it?
No.
Okay, well, let's do some research on it.
I just think it's similar to the conflict situation. If it's not done by the client on the record, then that's the problem.
Well, that's not the client. The attorney made the waiver. The client is sitting there, you know. There's all sorts of issues here that are different than that. The question is, what do we do now? So I would like all of you to weigh in on the issue at hand, which is, what do we do now?
I'd be happy to. Thank you.
Now, will you fax your materials to my office? Do you still have that number?
I do. I saved that on my WordPerfect.
I'll authorize fax service on Mr. Mesereau and Mr. Zonen, Mr. Snedden. And I want to have all of this by 8 o'clock Monday morning.
That's fine.
And then would you call your judge and tell him that I have accommodated him and do understand the situation with him?
I will. Thank you very much, Your Honor.
Anything else?
I'm still struggling with this matter that I have on Friday. Assuming we're through with Mr. Geragos by the 11:30 break, would you be willing to call the jury in? In other words, we would have witnesses. If he's done in a half an hour, we would have witnesses to take us to the 11:30 break. Would that be all right?
All right.
Okay.
Would you have? I would like to have the jury commissioner immediately leave a message for all the jurors right now that the day off on the 20th has been cancelled. We're going to use it so that any plans they have they can change, and prevent them from making plans in anticipation. Anything else? Okay.